This is the Fluid Jobs podcast, where motorsport professionals share their journeys and offer actionable advice for breaking into and advancing in the competitive world of motorsport. In today's podcast, I chat with Ralph Dale, a field applications engineer at McLaren Applied. So if you've ever dreamed of travelling the F1 calendar and working behind the scenes in the world's top racing series, this episode is for you. Ralph shares how he turned his passion for cars into a career, offering insights into his path from engineering school to freelancing with race teams. You'll gain practical advice on how to break into motorsport and work your way up to a role like his. Well, first of all, thank you very much for joining me today. Really appreciate you being here. And let's start with the basics. What does your company do and what's your role within it?
So, hi Scott. So McLaren Applied, we deliver high performance technology and engineering solutions to motorsport predominantly, but also automotive and transport as well. And my role is field applications engineer in the motorsport team.
Okay, so field applications engineer at McLaren Applied. What does that exactly mean? You know, what does your day-to-day look like? What kind of projects are you working on?
So my role is purely Formula One. So I am involved in supporting the SECU contract, which is a standard ECU supply for Formula One. So ultimately, I'm a customer support engineer. I'm representing McLaren Applied at the track and also as a first line of support if teams contact us with queries regarding the McLaren software or the McLaren ECU that all the teams use in Formula One.
Okay, yeah. So the McLaren ECU's in all of the cars down the pit lane, and you're at the races. You're going to the factories. What does that look like? Are you traveling around a lot?
A bit of both. So the role that I've got, we've got a team of about 4 people that go to the races. We split all the races equally, and we've always got a trackside presence. As well as that, we'll always have someone supporting the races, supporting the team remotely from the UK, should anything come up additionally. And additionally, we can also do sort of ad hoc visits to teams, to power unit manufacturers, or even other series if they need some in-person support. Ultimately, we're effectively meant to be sort of the first line response for any customer queries with the motorsport products.
And so is that mainly hardware or is it software as well, or is it a mix of both?
Yeah, it's both. So the same with any ECU is when you buy an ECU, you're effectively locked into a format for receiving that data. So everyone that makes an ECU normally makes their own data viewer. So we have Atlas, which again is used extensively throughout Formula One and other series as well. We have not many problems, of course, but we do get plenty of questions around the software as much as with the hardware. Obviously, when you think with the hardware, you bolt an ECU into the car and it works fine. Whereas with software, you might have several hundred users potentially in every team. So invariably, people do need a bit of help from time to time solving issues.
And I guess all of those users are wanting different pieces of information from the ECU and the software as well, right?
Yes, yeah, exactly. And they've all got different use cases, be it an aerodynamicist might just want to look at some push rod loads or some pressure tappings data from some testing they've done. You might have a race engineer, you might have a strategy guy or girl, you might have someone who's not at the track but is in a remote support room in Woking or Brackley or wherever, supporting their team from the UK. So yeah, plenty of different use cases and ways to use the software.
Fantastic. Well, let's take your kind of career back to the start, although that isn't so long ago, I don't think. But at the beginning, were you interested in motorsport? Was it a passion of yours, or did you have some other route into Formula One?
Was I interested? Yeah, I think so. I only actually started watching Formula One probably, I think, when Sebastian Vettel was really dominating. So I think that must have been like 2012, 2013, maybe. In those first Red Bull Championship years. That's when I got into it, when I was probably 16 or 17. I grew up in a family of I've got two brothers, mum and dad, so we all like cars, but neither of my parents are engineers. Neither of them worked in automotive or motorsport. We just like cars, and I watched Top Gear in the evening. That was kind of the bulk of, I guess, the nurturing for how I found that interest. But yeah, I obviously didn't really consider until quite late that you could do an engineering degree, that there was a job working in Formula One and working on race cars. So, but I got there in the end. I found it, and yeah, here I am now.
And so how did you go about that? Like, from understanding that you were interested in cars and racing, what was the next step for you? Did you have, a university education? Did you go and look for that? And how did you make that decision if you did?
So thankfully I realised prior to university that I needed an engineering degree. That's probably no secret. If you want to be an engineer in almost every motorsport series, you need to have an engineering degree. But I did realise before university, but after I'd already made my A-level choices, is our sort of 16 to 18 year subject choices in England. I hadn't chosen maths. I had chosen physics and got average grades in that. So I applied for a foundation engineering degree at Oxford Brookes University that ultimately gave me a year to learn all the basic sort of maths and physics that I would have learned had I chosen maths and physics, I guess, at A level. So I guess I did an extra year there, but it meant I could then go on and do a normal motorsport engineering degree at Oxford Brookes. I did that for 3 years and then graduated, and then went straight into motorsport.
Okay, fantastic. So you did that kind of foundation year to almost transition to get the right subjects that you needed to before you went on to getting your degree.
Yeah, exactly that. Yeah.
And what precise degree was it at Oxford Brookes?
I did the motorsport technology BSc. There's also an engineering BEng. I think there might be an MEng as well if you want to go and do a master's, but I think broadly the remit is the same. And actually the first 2 years, I think, of the 3 years were very similar. It's like any sort of mechanical engineering degree. You follow, it doesn't matter if you want to be civil or structural or aerospace or aeronautics or motorsport or automotive, you need to know about using CAD, you need to know about thermodynamics, about mechanics, about materials science and testing. So that all applies. So you learn the same fundamentals, and then maybe sort of towards the end of year 2 and definitely in year 3, you start to specialize a bit more, and the course is sort of split a little bit. So the mechanical students might design a bicycle frame or landing gear for an aircraft, was one of their courseworks, whereas we might have designed some suspension components or a chassis, which was what we did, or do some sort of race car aerodynamics projects. So everyone's got the same skills, but I guess it's the way it's applied was sort of that started to separate in sort of the latter half of the second year and the third year.
Fantastic. And during that period, I suppose, particularly towards the end of it, did you have your eye on any kind of extracurricular things that you could do to add to your CV, or did you just get your degree and then go into the job space?
Even before, like towards the end, I think probably my first or second year, maybe even my first year of my bachelor's, I was already starting to go and do some freelancing, going around sports cars teams like British GT4 teams or British touring car teams, just ringing up, just cold calling, effectively asking if they were interested in having an extra engineer along for not much money to come and help out. And most people said no, but if you don't ask, you don't get. Eventually some people said yes, and that was the start, really. So I started going to races as a weekend warrior, we'd term it now, to sort of drive up on a Friday or even just sneak off on Thursday, and just be at the track for 3 days and then back into university on Monday.
So can you just get a little bit more into the kind of practical side of that? When you first did the outreach, because I think a lot of people think it's more difficult than it otherwise might be. First of all, you're the right kind of candidate, right? You're studying for a degree in motorsport. Sorry, so I think someone's got the flu on your side.
I do, yeah. I think it's everywhere at the moment.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, I've got it too. So anyway, so you're already the right kind of person. But then when you started to think, well, look, I need to get some practical experience out in the field with a team. Why did you choose a GT team, and what did it look like? Right, were you emailing them? Were you calling them? How did you go about that? What was the conversion rate, I suppose?
Ooh, so I was generally calling because, and even now, that kind of manifests in the way I like to work. So I like to be in the office. I like to call people. I know that it's a generational thing, but a lot of people I know don't like calling people. Even for like a takeaway, I'm happy to call people just because you always, if you go, even if I, rather than messaging someone at work, I'd rather go and see them and speak to them because you always find something extra out and you always find something that will help you. Speaking to people means you normally get a tip or something. If you email them, they can just leave it. If you ring up, they at least have to say something to you, right? Might give you a tip or tell you when to call back. The reason I spoke to GT and touring car teams was, I guess, twofold. Was one, I didn't have enough time, or maybe I didn't back myself enough or have enough experience, in my opinion, to go and do like a European or above level. And the other reason, so obviously it being national had logistical benefits, right? I could just drive up there in my Renault Twingo on a Thursday night or Friday morning super early and then drive home really late on Sunday. So that was easy. But also just because the way single seaters works is because it's much higher budget single seaters. They're much more likely, and there's a lot more races. There's more private testing. It's much more likely to have full-time staffing. Whereas with sports cars, because it's a pro-am format, that means you've got two drivers in the car, a pro driver and an amateur driver. The amateur driver is typically a wealthy business person who is, excited about cars, as we all are, and wants to go racing. But they've got a business to run, right? Or he or she has a business to run. So most sports cars championships, or even touring cars, only have 6 to 10 rounds, which means it's more economical for a team to just have contractors and freelancers. So it's much easier, is the point I was getting to, just to dip in and out and have people come and go. Whereas, as I proved later in my career, if you want to go and do single seaters, there's full-time jobs doing that, even at a grassroots level in Formula 4. So
Yeah, and I think that there's a certain sweet spot of team, and it seems like you probably got that bang on, to be honest. You probably went as high as you could possibly go with the lack of experience that you had. There's a certain level of team that where they're just not going to, they're going to struggle to allow you to come and even hang out because they've got big budgets, high paying customers, even more so than maybe the GT. And they only want people that are maybe working there full time. And so I think when I speak to a lot of people trying to get into motorsport about this, you gotta, you can't jump too far straight away. You got to find that sweet spot where you're going to get the best experience, but you are going to be allowed, into the garage.
yeah, definitely. I think once you've got some experience, then that's probably enough. If you've got a season, even of just going to most of the races or doing a reasonable number of private tests, even karting, that's probably going to be enough to get you into most national sort of teams. Just because for the teams, they know that when you turn up, you're not going to panic. If you need to do a change in the session and when things get tense and when the pressure is applied, they know you've already sort of got an expectation of what's going to happen and how you'll perform, and they can get a reference for you. But obviously, if you've not been to a track before, it's not like going to an office. You sit down in a comfy chair. Could be raining, could be cold.
Yeah.
British motorsport normally is both. So definitely getting up to Knock Hill a few times.
I was going to say, yeah, a wet Wednesday at Cadwell isn't exactly the same as the McLaren offices.
No, I remember. It's funny looking at where I am now in my career. I wouldn't have thought I'd be here when I was standing on top of the Carlin F3 truck in Hill with like gale force winds and rain. Stood on top of the truck, on top of the roof of it, like pulling down radio mast, thinking, what am I doing here? Getting soaked, cold hands. But
And about to be struck by lightning as well. We've all been there.
Yes,
I've been
well,
there too, Ralph.
exactly. Yeah. So, well, that, and then that's followed by a 8-hour drive home
Yeah.
in the team van. So
While you're still wet.
exactly, yeah. It's character building.
Two lessons here then. Get out there and do it. And secondly, it's not as glamorous as it might look.
Yes, yeah, no. And on the rejections, like in the sort of the tin tops, I guess you could call it. There's so much freelancing and contractors that once you meet a few mechanics, a few engineers, then they can introduce you probably several times a year. Even now that I'm working full time, I get the odd call or a text from someone asking if I can help out. If I can't, can I recommend someone good? And obviously, if you're good, people will ask you, and you'll only recommend good people. And
Yeah.
exactly, and you just meet people, and even people being freelance right into positions. So I had texts from a mechanic who is now a team manager. I've worked with driver coaches that are now team managers, so
Yeah.
definitely helps to have those relationships. Even if you just say hi, if you're there, or try your best, it all comes back.
Yeah, and as you move through your career, I think that just gets easier and easier. Now I'm 38 now, and my colleagues and friends from the past have all risen up through the ranks, and just things get easier. So I guess just to summarize that section, you were studying the right thing, you put the work in, and got yourself out there, picked up the phone, wrote some emails, wasn't scared of being rejected, went and actually worked during those weekends. And from there, you're in there, you're doing a good job, hopefully, and your network starts to grow and you get your reputation. And then things get a bit easier from that point.
Yeah, that's basically it. And even like a lot of my more, or maybe a lot of the more academically talented or naturally gifted, or maybe even harder working guys and girls at university, they weren't getting these sorts of opportunities, not because they couldn't, just because they weren't trying. I guess maybe they were reaching for the stars, or some of them were completely set on Formula One and didn't have much other motorsport interest. That's fair enough, but a lot of them just, I guess, didn't have the enough motivation. They said they wanted to do it, but they weren't acting. And you're never going to get a job if you don't apply. That's what someone came up to me. I was in my evening a few days ago. I was at a climbing wall doing some climbing recreationally, and an IT guy asked me about. He saw a job on McLaren's website for an IT job. I was like, "Oh, that would be fun." I said, "Did you apply?" I said, "No." I said, "Well, you're not going to get it then."
Yeah.
Like, for the most part, if you want it, then that will show in your actions. But
Yeah, exactly. You need to put yourself in the ballpark, right?
exactly, yeah. And the chances are low. It's that's it. But I'm here. If, the more times you apply, that improves your chances, right? So
Absolutely, 100%. If you set everything up right, there's no way that it's not achievable. You just got to put yourself in the position ready for the luck to happen, right?
yeah, exactly.
So fast forwarding a little bit, when you took your first full-time role in motorsport, where was that? What did it look like, and how did you get there?
So I spent 4 years at Carlin. I did 4 seasons at Carlin Motorsport, which is now Rodin. They're now rebranded as Rodin Motorsport. They're in Farnham. They are, I guess, the UK sort of premier single-seater racing team. They've got cars in everything from British Formula 4, Spanish Formula 4 now, up to FIA Formula 2. I've had Lando Norris drive for them, obviously. One who's Formula 4, Formula 3, and second in Formula 2 championships with Carlin. They also ran Max Chilton's IndyCar project. Sort of a force to be reckoned with in British motorsport, and that was where I learned, a huge amount.
And was Carlin one of the companies that you were gaining your experience at beforehand while you were at university, or was that an actual
No, it
first time
wasn't.
you got the job?
That was the first time I got a sort of a proper full-time trackside job. When I was there, we had a few guys and girls that were sort of coming and going, I think, in the Formula 4 team, only because that's probably how the budget was best distributed. But when you look at, I think, most of the teams at that level, even at Formula 3 and Formula 2 level, lots of the teams will plump for freelancers, and that was maybe what was more different about Carlin, was that we had pretty much everyone was full-time employed, except for maybe areas like the truckies,
Yeah.
where their line of work is better suited to be freelance. But that was a great thing, was that what you wouldn't expect is we had a full-time stickers guy to wrap all the cars and do all the vinyl, because we had like 25 race cars, probably in 6 or 7 or 5 series, 4 or 5 race trucks. So there was enough for that. We had a full-time R&D guy. We had a full-time chief engineer. So we had a reasonable, we had a machine shop as well. We had a full-time machinist. So, it was a step up from sort of garage-easty kind of from what you brung. It was a proper race team.
And what was your role there? What was your specific role?
My role was, I was a data engineer.
You were the data engineer.
I started doing Formula 3 with alongside another data engineer called Simon, who's at Red Bull now, as I think Checo's systems engineer. A number of guys I work with now, I think mostly in Formula 1, a few guys at Williams, a few guys at Red Bull, a few guys at Haas. And yeah, I started doing Formula 3 as things go with Carlin and with most of those junior motorsport teams. It's volume helps. So most junior motorsport teams will enter almost every single series. Formula 2, Formula 3, Formula 4, national, so like national Formula 3, and then regional Formula 3 in Europe, as well as British Formula 3. So that's how that works. And invariably, my role was to do Formula 3, but I ended up running Formula 2 test cars, Formula 4. I did quite a few races with them. We did LMP2 stuff. So ultimately, I got hands on lots of different race cars, lots of different hardware as well as software, which also meant I met more people and also just got more experience with different software packages and started to understand the pros and cons of each. So it kind of forms the basis of your expertise, I guess.
Yes, yeah, floating in out. We use like Motec and other different.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Yeah, exactly that. Yeah. So Motec, Cosworth at the lower, more budget end, there was Life Racing, was what Formula 4 used. I think they still use that. I think for British Formula 3 used, and I think they still do use Cosworth. I was using the Bosch Motorsport system when I was doing European Formula 3, but that series is now mostly dissolved, and I think the FIF3 and FIF2 series that you see on TV on the F1 calendar, they all use Morelli, I think.
yes,
Wintax.
yeah. And so, how long were you at Carling for?
For 4 seasons.
4 seasons.
4
And
years.
did you feel like you there was a progression in your role there, or did you go from F2 to F4 to F3 and move around as required for the company?
Probably a bit of both. Move around as required, but they wouldn't have asked me to run the Formula 2 test cars or jump in last minute to go and do F4 races if they didn't think I was capable, despite having not used the software or worked with those engineers before. So you for a lot of it, you make your own luck, and your work speaks more than anything else you can say, really. So yeah, just a pro and a con, because then you start getting asked to do loads of stuff and people come to you for things, but it's only a positive reflection on the quality of your work, I think.
Of course, yeah. So just continuing to do a good job, I suppose, and being there as well. And so the next move, the next career move, what did that look like, and why did it happen?
So coming here to McLaren Applied, a lot of my colleagues at university, most of whom are in F1 now, I think a lot of them would wholly admit, and I alluded to earlier, they only wanted to be, they were tunnel vision, they want to go in Formula 1 and nowhere else. That's the best, right? And I understand that. And I think most of them are there now in Formula 1. Maybe that being surrounded by that so much, and maybe the university did push that quite heavily for obvious reasons. It's prestigious and it makes the university look good, and it shows you're educating the best students, right? So I don't blame them, but I think I kind of reacted to that, and I quite enjoyed endurance racing and other series, and the whole of the world of motorsport that exists outside Formula 1, which people don't really realise. Obviously, your viewers will, right? So I'd written off Formula 1. I thought it would be nice to try it one day, but I was very happy to have had a career in motorsport and not done Formula One. And then someone let me know that McLaren Applied had a job advert up. And kind of, as I've said before, I just had a go and applied, got an interview, and then I was quite surprised when I got given an offer. So I thought, okay, well, that was, I was sort of going into each one with, I've got nothing to lose. Here I am.
And what was it about McLaren that that pulled you towards that job? What were you really looking for?
I think the opportunity to travel, definitely. A lot of teams, you need to spend some time at the factory beforehand, maybe do 1, 2, 3, 4 years and build a reputation. Whereas at least with McLaren, they were offering a role that would give me some travel already, but also being, I guess, on the front line, sort of not hands-on literally, but pretty much hands-on operationally with the ECU in this case. Also, there's a general scarcity. There's not a scarcity of roles in Formula One. If you look on any team's careers page, there's always something up. But such is the way, the nature of Formula One, they want the best people, and that means that invariably, if you want to work in Formula One, you need to go in with a niche already. Almost, if you want to be an aerodynamicist, you can't just. You're less likely to be successful if you've been trackside and you've not studied CFD that much. So I'd already gone down a niche of electronics, and I guess that kind of just matched the role best with what McLaren had at the time. I did quite a lot of freelancing, and up until probably a year ago, I was still doing some freelancing on the side, doing race engineering and performance engineering, lots of more vehicle dynamics based stuff and sort of car management stuff for some sports cars teams, which was good fun and nice to keep my toe in and keep my head in with that side. Definitely helps when you're talking to those sorts of engineers in Formula One as well. You understand what their needs are, so it only improves the relationship with the customer. But yeah, I think with Formula One, such as the way you need to find your niche because they want the best. So
yeah, it's too hard to go in as a generalist, I suppose, because the competition is so high. You said there's plenty of F1 jobs, which there are, but the problem is the competition for those jobs is incredibly high as well.
Exactly, and I think there definitely are roles for generalists that will invariably be like operations or management roles, but to get to those, you obviously need to have done some time in a team already at the bottom, which is probably where you get. Probably the further down you go, you probably become more niche, and then above that, obviously, as your responsibilities broaden for what you're responsible for, then I guess it's less and less niche, but you need more experience, and you inherently become more of a generalist.
Absolutely. Okay, so this podcast, this video is for people looking to get into motorsport or looking to kind of level up in motorsport. And I suppose what's, over your career, you've been successful rather quickly. What would be the biggest piece of advice that you'd give to people out there who are looking to get in or move up?
I think if you want it, then you'll get there almost irrespective of what I say. Kind of like what I said to that guy at the climbing wall. If he wanted it, he would have applied, right? He shouldn't have needed me to tell him. But the best piece of advice, and generally, exactly, but it's true. But then what I generally tell people is that it's all very well having a good degree, but everyone that applies for that job is going to have a good degree. So you need something different. Be it if all you've got is a local kart track, that's fine. Go there, offer to help out, learn about go-karts, and I'm sure something you learn there will come back, something you can use in an interview, something you can use at the track. A go-kart and a Formula One car might seem like worlds apart, but the principle is the same, and the way you operate over a race weekend are very similar, really. So just go and get something interesting, something different, some experience. And yeah, if go-kart track's all there is, that's fine.
Yeah, and I think one of the points sorry, Ralph. I think one of the points there is, Ralph, it's not as much about the car or the level of car as it is the mentality of the person who wants to get out there and do it, right? We have a lot of people listening that are outside of the UK or outside of the US, where the racing scene might not be as kind of strong as it is here. But like you say, like there's kart tracks everywhere. Get out to the kart track, and it shows that you're willing to get outside, get uncomfortable and go and do it.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. So I do get those questions, and most countries, despite the size of the F1 calendar, most countries don't have an FIA Grade 1 circuit, and you can't just pop along to a race. But Brazil have got a great stock car series. In Australia, they've got V8s. In Spain, they've got they love bikes a lot more. And if MotoGP or motorbikes is what it is, then fine, go and do that. Or if it's like, I think in the Scandinavian regions, they've got a lot of truck racing and European truck racing. Go and do that. Go and do rallying. Go and do go-karts. Go and do anything. Or if it's Dakar, or if it's, go and help out at a mountain bike race. If it gets your hands on, if you're trying to optimize something or figure out why something broke and how you can improve it, then it shows that you've got something in here and something up here, really, and you've proven that then.
Exactly. If someone applied to a job and said, look, we don't have very much motorsport in my country, but I have been out and, I've engineered the damping on this mountain bike, then I'd be actually very impressed by that. And it's fine, right? You're doing the right things with what you've got. And so I think that's probably the key lesson from that.
Yeah, no, totally. And particularly, even that example there, if it was mountain bikes, you think, well, actually, hang on, they've probably had to do something, with less budget and less options and not as much specialist tooling as we might have had at Carlin to engineer a Formula 4 car. So actually, they might be quite good at, if they can improvise things and get a good solution that provides a performance benefit on a mountain bike at that level with no budget, then what will happen if we give them some budget? They can, make really big swathes and inroads into adding value.
Fantastic, Ralph. Thank you very much for your time. I really appreciate it. There were some fantastic insights in there. Thank you for sharing that with our listeners.
Thank you.